Every so often, a game comes out that is so spectacular to look at, it may hide many of the smaller problems floating just outside the periphery. Muramasa, the Demon Blade, is able to rise above its pedestrian combat because its meticulously crafted 2D backdrops are absolutely stunning. From gentle, wind-blown wheat fields to majestic waterfalls and enchanted caves, the art serves as the main draw, pushing you to see what visual feast awaits you in the next area. The simple combat is smooth and stylish, as fun to watch as it is to pull off, but the lack of diverse moves and tactics gives it a feeling of repetition after a few hours. Still, this is a gorgeous game and should be experienced by anyone who digs hand-drawn art. The meandering story thankfully stays in the background, but there is one important element to this tale. You can play as either Momohime or Kisuke, and though the lands they travel across are the same, they acquire different weapons and battle against different bosses along the way. Their paths cross during the journey, which adds the feeling that this demon war is going on, even without your interaction. You can switch between their stories at the title screen, and you'll need to play as both if you want to get all the collectible goodies. There are 3 different controller options in Muramasa, though none of them contain a motion control option. You have your choice between the classic or GameCube controllers or the Wii standard remote plus nunchuck combination. Regardless of which method you prefer, they are all precise and all rely on just one button for the majority of your offensive and defensive maneuvers. The streamlined combat is easy to grasp and pulling off the various dashes and strikes is satisfying, but the dearth of more advanced attack techniques removes much of the thrill. As it is, tapping the main button will strike once, and you can tap it repeatedly to initiate a combo. Holding it down blocks, and if you time it right, you can parry a thrown weapon back at your opponent. If you hold down the button and move the directional pad, you swoop in that direction, either with dashing strikes, an uppercut, or downward rush. The majority of your enemies can be beaten by just using these moves, and it can be fun zipping across the screen with your Sword of Death. As you block your enemy's blows, your sword will weaken and eventually crack. Once broken, your sword is severely limited, but you can switch it out at any time with the other 2 swords you carry into battle. The heroes have a penchant for swords and can acquire more than 100 through the course of the game. The world is presented as an open map, though there are colored barriers barring your path. When you defeat a boss, you steal their sword and can cut down those walls. You can also forge powerful swords using the experience you gain in battle to craft your own weapons of destruction. You'll need to utilize the Forge Workshop because Muramasa can get difficult at times. There are 2 difficulty settings you can switch between at any time, and if you choose the harder option, you'll need to level up against a wealth of ordinary enemies so you can build your strength for the challenging boss fights. The steep challenge gives worthwhile incentive to forge the more powerful swords, but the lack of diverse enemies limits the appeal somewhat. Most battles can be completed in less than 30 seconds, and since you need only slash away without inhibition, you won't have to put much thought into the fights either. Still, finally unlocking a super powerful sword is pretty satisfying, and you can even get different endings depending on what sword you have equipped going into the final battle. The bosses have a bunch of different attack patterns and some truly bizarre artistic styles. In one battle, you square off against the foot of a towering god, taking the fight into the clouds when you weaken him enough. Another fight has you slicing giant centipedes, cutting off their heads and removing their meaty middle pieces. Even with a limited moveset, the boss fights are pretty cool, because you'll have to rely on your defensive moves much more often. You can be decimated in just a few quick hits if you aren't careful, so finally felling one of these grotesque beings is exhilarating. Outside of combat, there isn't much to do. The exploration aspects are pretty weak. There's only a smattering of hidden items in the world, and the map clearly distinguishes which area has something you need to search for, and which doesn't. The platforming is stiff, though you won't have to make any precarious leaps in this adventure. Walking from one battle to the next gives you a chance to marvel at the fancy backdrops, but it would have been nice to have more interesting duties to partake in. It's a shame the other elements of Muramasa are not able to reach the level of its amazing art, because this is just a spectacular looking game. But there is still plenty of content here, and though the combat isn't very deep, it's still fun to fly across the screen and slice up your many attackers. Muramasa is for art aficionados who aren't put off by simple combat.